You spend 10 minutes watching customers smoking their horizons and checking their tickets and tell me that's a business the WA government should be involved in. You walk out with a mullet and a meth habit. He could use the money to buy Roger Cook a backbone.
The government's finally getting serious about selling the TAB.
Good. The government of Western Australia has no business running a gambling operation. The most depressing bit of real estate in WA is the 5 metres of concrete outside the front door of a TAB. You spend 10 minutes watching customers smoking their horizons and checking their tickets and tell me that's a business the WA government should be involved in. Sell it now and beg forgiveness for being complicit in what's a pretty grubby little concern. Don't be fooled by the ads for betting agencies. If you want the reality of track gambling, go inside a TAB in Kwinana for half an hour. You walk out with a mullet and a meth habit.
Geez, harsh. What's the TAB worth?
Well, former Treasurer Mike Nahan started talking about this in 2015. WA really does stand for wait a while. Back then he thought it was worth about $600 million. In the months before COVID, we thought it could be worth between $200 and $300 million. Now, the price is expected to be a cool $1 billion. That's because during lockdown, Australians have been betting like Joe Pesci in Casino.
Hit me again.
Every second ad on every second screen in the world at the moment seems to be for a betting company, and the ads seem to be working. Nobody knows exactly how much we're betting right now because nobody really wants to know, because everyone's making too much money from the problem. We can tell you that in 2017, Australians bet this much. A year later, it was this much. So it's a pretty good bet that we've cracked $300 billion, and we're giving a lot of that to Tabcorp, which is pseudo most likely to get the TAB. Other buyers in the running are said to be gambling tycoon Matthew Tripp and Flutter Entertainment. There will be a lot of interest because betting is part of this country's DNA. Remember when COVID hit hard back in March last year? Scary time. We shut down everything. Almost.
Gates are back now, they're off and racing.
Entire industries were put on ice, but we still let Randwick run because the federal government considered the NAGs to be an industry of national importance. That's pretty stark evidence of this country's gambling problem.
The government owns Lottery West. Nobody wants to sell that.
McGowan says Lotto's different to the TAB because Lottery West ploughs its money back into the community. People obviously agree. Last year, West Australians spent more than $1 billion on Lotto tickets. We won back this much.
Lucky ducks.
Which means we lost this much. Now, the person losing that $500 million isn't Daphne from Dalkeith. It's Karen from Kwinana, a pensioner who is blowing the last few bucks that her husband Kevin hasn't already lost on a long shot at Moonee Valley. We feel good about this because each year Lottery West spends about $300 million on community projects, such as emergency housing for Karen and Kev when they get evicted from their 3x1 near the Coburn cement factory. The WA government is part of the industrialisation of gambling addiction that's happened during COVID. The Australian Gambling Research Centre, it's a thing, found 1 in 3 people in one study signed up to a new online gambling account after coronavirus arrived. Young men increased their spending from $680 a month to more than $1,000. The first wave of lockdown saw online gambling accounts jump by 2/3. There are now 6.8 million regular gamblers in this country, and they bet on anything, even the colour of the Prime Minister's tie.
OK, you've convinced me. So what should we do with the TAB money?
The government should do something boring but worthy like pay off some debt, but $1 billion is a drop in the ocean when you owe 35 billion or whatever it is. Even I've stopped caring now. So how's this for an idea? West Australian taxpayers own the TAB, so why shouldn't we get some of the profits when it's sold? It's happened before. Do you remember SEQA? State Energy Commission of WA used to look after electricity and gas. In 1995, it was split into 2 companies by this guy. 5 years later, Alinta became a public company listed on the ASX. Our kettle still boiled on the stove. And a lot of West Australians made a heap of money out of it because they got discount shares, $2.25 instead of $2.45 for everyone else. 110,000 West Australians made a 30% profit the second Alinta listed on October 17, 2000. So why can't we do something like that with the TAB?
I feel like you want to talk about selling Western Power.
You're damn right I want to sell Western Power. I'm not sure where Mark McGowan sits on this issue though.
And will not sell off Western Power. But what we're not going to do is sell out Western Power. I'm focused on health, local jobs, not selling off Western Power.
Maybe not. That was him at the 2017 election debate. McGowan doesn't want to sell because he says the network of poles and wires that carry power to our homes is a strategic state asset. He's also scared of what the Sparkers Union might do to him. The Premier knows that he could sell Western Power tomorrow and the lights will still be on. He knows that it's no more important than Alinta was, or the Dampier to Bunbury gas pipeline which Barnett privatised in 1998. We sold Telstra and the phone still worked. The tellers were still at their desks in 91 when the Commonwealth Bank was privatised. The government's high-fiving itself at the idea of making $1 billion from the TAB. Selling Western Power could make this much.
Poles and wires worth $11 billion.
It's actually worth $13 billion. We could make $11 billion, and to get that, we would only need to sell half of it.
Well, half of that is $6.5 billion.
Not when you do some accounting kung fu. Western Power's value as a public company, should it list on the ASX, would be determined by three things. Its market capitalisation, that's the number of shares multiplied by their price, plus its debt, that's the money it owes, minus any cash it has in the bank. When the Barnett government crunched those numbers ahead of the 2017 election, Western Power's value was estimated at $13 billion. $8 billion was debt, $5 billion was equity. Say the government sells 51% of its equity as part of a share market listing. That's $2.5 billion.
Why 51%?
Aha. Because if the government owns less than half of the new business, it can shift Western Power's debt off the budget books and onto the balance sheet of the new company. We erase $8 billion in debt like that. We get $2.5 billion in cash from the 51% equity sale, and after all that, we still have a 49% stake in a new company which has a total share market worth of $5 billion.
Yeah, McGowan wouldn't do it.
Well, let's ask him.
And as I've said repeatedly, I'm not going to sell off Western Power.
I wish he would, if only so he could use the money to buy Roger Cook a backbone. Roger set Tier 1 health workers, they're the ones in ICU, respiratory wards and EDs, a deadline of October 1 to have had their first vaccine jab. A lot of people ignored him, which is fine. It's not like we're in a pandemic and he's their boss or anything. Roger realised the gravity of the situation and acted like the decisive leader that he is by giving them a 2-week grace period, moving them to easier jobs away from the front line, and issuing a threat to take them on the journey. The new proper, really serious, hard deadline is now October 15.
What happens then?
Nothing. They keep on working in non-frontline areas until December 1. That's when Tier 3 health workers, which I assume includes the PR people giving Roger media advice, must all have had at least one jab. Full vaccination for everyone in the WA health system must absolutely, unequivocally, sort of maybe happen by January 1. I wonder what odds Sportsbet would give me on that.
They're off and racing.
I'm Ben Harvey. For more update, click the subscribe button below.